इसको बड़ा करो। Hello friends, this talk was scheduled for 6 p.m. but somehow we had some problems in the connectivity and we couldn't go online. We offer our apologies for not having met you at that time, and I hope you have all got the notice for rescheduling, and now we are here to talk about Lal. Lal is the icon of Kashmir. Kashmir is well known all over the world, and it will not be an exaggeration to say that Lal is also equally known all over. Lal has many feathers to her person. She is, of course, the most well known poetess of Kashmir. She is a Shav savant. She is also the pioneer amongst the ladies of Kashmir to bring her own talent, the view of Kashmiri ladies to the fore in such a way that 6 or 7 centuries later, today, even today, that greatness has not been surpassed by any man or woman in Kashmir. When we speak of Lal, we have a host of images, legends, folklore, faith, sheer faith of the people, and the great devotion that people paid to her in our views. But it is a sad fact that we know so little about Lal. In fact, if we go for the concrete evidence, we have got practically only her walk, the body of her walk, and the reiteration by Nundarishi Sahjanand, wherein in one of his Venads, one of his laudations, Nundarish invokes all the spiritual giants of Kashmir who preceded him and says, Tas Padman Porichalale, Yemi Gale Amritcho, Shu Uchun Thale Thale, Duthmevar, Dito Dio. That Lal of Padmanpur, who drank of ambrosia in mouthfuls, and who saw, experienced Sakshatkar of Shiva himself. And Sahjanand asks the Lord that he too may be blessed the same way in which Lal of yore was blessed. Now, this is the most concrete evidence of Lal having been a person, because Sahjanand or Nundarish or Sheikhul Alam, as he is variously called, though there is an issue in itself. One of our great literary historians says that these were probably two, possibly three personas. In any case, the Vent is the person Sahjanand. He was the immediate person who came after Lal, and he was not a contemporary, though not a contemporary, but the person very close to the time of Lal. So his recording, Tas Padman Porichalale, is irrefutable evidence of Lal having been there, and that also validates the whole body of work that is associated with Lal. That said, Lal has been so enveloped in shrouds, in interpretations, in the myths and legends created by the people who seek to sometimes they may be very sincere, they may be trying to believe, they may believe that they are extolling the seventh, but in the end, what they end up with is presenting a persona which is not the person that the person may have been. Say, for example, we have got one of the legends which says that the hair, very small, tiny hairs in the lotus stalk, nadru of Kashmir, which is a staple vegetable used by Kashmiris, all Kashmiris. When we break it after that cooked lotus stalk or even the raw lotus stalk, we have very tiny, minute fibers which stick them through them. The legend has it that one day Lal was she was combing through wool because ladies in Kashmir at that time they used to spin wool, spin shahtus that was also spun by ladies, and then they used to weave it into fibers. So what the legend says is that one day, Lal was cleaning this wool, and the waste of that wool, whatever she was left there, what had to be discarded, she took it and threw it into Dal Lake. And that comes to us, that is what we see the tiny fibers in Nadru. Now, this is a legend which every lover of Lal would like to have, would like to believe, but simply cannot. This simply cannot be true. Lotus stocks have been there even before Lal, and they have always had those tiny fibers sticking out through them. So, whatever your devotion may force you to link the two and make a legend out of a phenomena of biological phenomena, it does not help the legend of Lal. This is just one instance. There are so many of them. And in fact, the real persona of Lal has been lost in this maze of legends. More important here is the historical, socio-religious milieu in which she lived. When did Lal live? Sometime back, we in a literary group at Jammu, we had a discussion on 2 points. What was the name of Lal and what was her time, what was her lifespan? Almost all the literary figures at Jammu who were present in that Samprati group discussing it for a whole day came to the conclusion that the name would have been Lalita, which was reverentially turned into Lalleshwari, and that's how she came to be known as. And death is a suffix we all add to elderly ladies out of our reverence, and so it became Lalleshwari or Laldev, the basic name Lalita. Here, I would also like to point out that some people have been insisting on another name, Padmavat. That is Padmavati. That is simply a derivation from Padmanpur, and one of our another great early journalists of Kashmir, Anand Kaul had a hand in it. Anand Kaul had a hand in another legend. He related a tale wherein he said that Lal's guru was Sedmol, and that guru saw Lal through 7 consecutive births in his own lifetime. And the end, Anand Kaul made her. She, in the first of these 7 births, she had died at childbirth, giving birth to a son, and in the last, Anand Kaul makes her marry that very particular son. Now, this is what fantasies, legends, things like that, they are made of. And we can easily see that though devotees like to wave such type of fantasies around their objects of devotion, the sad fact is that these legends do not help the person, they distort the person. Likewise, the name Padmavati does not add anything to the persona of Lal, and we better be silent. There is a practice in Kashmir where ladies, after their marriage, they are given a new name. That's okay. But the point is, do we know for certain whether Padmavati was her earlier name, later name, whatever? We only know about the name Lal. And Lal is clearly derived from Lalita, and that's that. Now we come to Lal's time. This is of very crucial importance. Kashmir of 14th century was not all of it, but it saw at least 3 turbulences, very severe turbulences. The first turbulence was in 1320 when the invader Duluch invaded Kashmir and devastated Kashmir. That was the first. The second turbulence was when Shahmir captured the reigning queen, Kota Devi, and usurped the kingdom. That happened in 1339. The third turbulence in Kashmir came toward in the last decade of the 14th century. It was around 1393 or 94. That was the coming of Shah Hamdan's son, Mir Muhammad Hamdani, to Kashmir, and the king, Sikandar, taking him as his friend, philosopher, guide, everything, and doing his bidding in all affairs. That created the third turbulence. Now, these 3 turbulences in the 14th century Kashmir, 1320, 1339, and 1393 or 94. These are so very unsettling that many people, many knowing people, I must add, are not able to position these events, these turbulences separately. Like, say, Dulacha came in 1320. The next usurpation by Shahmir, it occurred full 20 years later. So that gap of 20 years is there. Likewise, between Shahmir and the Sikandara, turning the iconoclast to the very brutal proselytizer, that happened in 1390, 495, and thereafter. So there is a gap of full 40 years. These gaps, let's say the 14th century till the last decade of the century, it was an entirely different Kashmir. And the Kashmir after during the last decade and thereafter, after the coming in of uh, Mir Muhammad Hamdani and Sikandara bowing to him, doing his bidding, that is a break with the earlier Kashmir. In Shamir, we don't find any break with the earlier Kashmir. Shamir is said to have come, John Raj tells us, he came to Kashmir as a refugee in 1313. That will be around 7 years before Dulacha struck. And it is some 26, a quarter century, more than a quarter century before he rose to the power. During that period and thereafter, Shamir presented himself very consciously, actively. We cannot say whether calculatedly or not, but very actively, very consciously as one of the local Kashmiris. There was no break in the traditions of Kashmir. There was no break in the polity of Kashmir. There was no break in the customs of Kashmir with Shah Mir coming to power. That is something very important for us. We have very clear evidence of it in the successors, at least 4 successors of Shah Mir. Shah Mir, John Raj tells us that soon after having come to power, Shah Mir relegated the kingdom to his 2 sons, whom he calls Jamshara and Lalleshwari, and himself gave himself up to luxuriating. The system continued. In fact, after the coming to fore by when Shah Mir usurped the power, a new class, not a new class, a certain class of people, Rajasthanis, they come to fore. Who are these Rajasthanis? They are the palace staff, the people who staffed the palace, the servants, attendants, officials, and all those. Because with there was definitely a break with the change of the kingship. There was some change in the lords, and these Rajasthanis became the new lords by their proximity to Shah Mir. But the point to be noted is that there was no break in the traditions. Now, again, we find when his son Jamshara, as he is called by John Raj, and later Jamshed by Persianized historians of the 16th century, and Lalleshwari and Alauddin, both these sons, they had Kashmiri Hindu ministers, army men, commanders, staffers, all of them. The same was true with Alauddin when he became the king, and when he passed the kingdom to his son, Sharshataka, who later came to be known as Shahabuddin. These same appears, this same polity went with him. Why I am relating all this? It is very important because when we talk of Lal, we are talking of this period. We have a very reliable researcher on Kashmir, Jayalal Kol Sahab. He tells us that after a lot of research into which I will not go right now, he says that Lal was probably born around 1310. We have a reference in Wakati Kashmir of Dedmari, which was written in 18th century, mid 18th century, and he says that Lal came to fore, means attained prominence during the reign of Alauddin. Now, Alauddin was the second son of Shahmir, and he ruled from 1343 to 1354. So during this period, Lal came into prominence. Many people reading this line of Dedmari, Muhammad Azam Dedmari, they have taken it to mean that she was born in this period. It's not so. She came into prominence during this period. She was born much earlier. She would have been in prime of her youth. If she was born in around 310, then she would have been around 30 during this period in 1340s, and that would have been the maturity of his person, the maturity of her poesy, her ideation, everything. And that is coming to fore during the period of Alauddin. Alauddin's son was Shahabuddin. The next reference we have about Lal is from again from Muhammad Azam Dedmari Waqat Kashmir, and he tells that Lal died during the reign of Shahabuddin. Shahabuddin himself died in 1373. Muhammad Azam also adds that she died at the age of 62. So, with 310 to 1310 to 1372, it fulfills almost all the known facts that she came to fore during Alauddin's reign, that she died during Shahabuddin's reign before his Shahabuddin's death. So we should take Lal's time. The most reliable time would be from around 1310 to 1372. Now, why this is important? This is very important because Lal lived in that particular milieu where, though there had been a change in kingship, the traditions, the thought, religion, people's perceptions, the language of the time, they had not changed at all. We have an incident from Shahabuddin's life which tells us that he was neither a fanatic nor a proselytizer, nor was there any significant what we later today call Islamization. An episode in Shahabuddin's life is Shahabuddin. This thing probably may also be noted that Shahmir had married his daughters to Hindu lords and had taken wives from Hindu lords for his sons. Jamshed or Jamshira's family, it was also Hindu. She also had a Hindu wife. So had Alauddin, and so had Shahabuddin. Shahabuddin's wife was called Lakshmi. John Raj tells that she was the daughter of Bula Brahman. These details, they are very important for understanding Lal and her life. Lakshmi had brought, while she was the wife of the queen, she had brought her own sister's daughter, Lhasa, to bring her up in the royal palace. When she grew up, she attained her youth. Shahabuddin was bewitched, and he became a paramour, or some say a wife. Let's take it as a second wife. And at one time, Lhasa gets very jealous of her own aunt, the queen Lakshmi, and asks and tells Shahabuddin that Lakshmi is using mantra, vyabhachar, to harm her. And she is using the Prime Minister Uday Shri for this purpose. Here, Shahabuddin tells her that Uday Shri is not a person given to Vyabchar, that he is a man of free ideas, and he calls him and tells him to test him, to show to Lhasa that we want our treasury is empty and we want to take some break a murti for making coins. Uday Shri agrees, and this shows tells Lhasa that this thing Uday Shri is not given to mantras or this sort of activity, and she gets placated. But the second aspect of it is that later, just after having cleared the doubts of Lhasa, Shahabuddin calls Uday Shri and reprimands him. He tells him, "You are the person. Do you want me to break the icons which our ancestors, which the great kings of yore have got car would have installed for their so that their name lives for long, and do you want me to be known as a black sheep for breaking those idols?" The point I am trying to tell is that there is clear evidence that right up to Shahabuddin and thereafter as well, we have got another instance there in the history telling that there was no proselytization, there was no what we generally people see it as the influence of Maulvis, the Islamization or change of religion. Nothing happened during this period when Lal lived. So when we are talking of Lal and her work, we have to keep in mind that she lived in a milieu that was a continuation of what had been there at her birth, what had been there for ages, and what got disturbed some 25, 20 years after her death during the later part of the reign of Sikandar. There's a walk of Lal. Isi öst, isi aso, isi dor kir patwat. Today, when a person, especially when a Kashmiri Pandit recites this particular work, the immediate connotation is that she is referring to continuance of the Pandit traditions, Hindu traditions in Kashmir. This is not so. There were no Muslims, no adversaries during Lal's time, and she was probably talking here in this particular work, if it is really hers, she was talking about Atma, our being, the continuance of the spirit, the spark of divinity, and that. In fact, the whole body of work of Lal has been distorted by a supposed misinterpretation of history of the period when she lived. People assume, presume that the religion had changed, that there had been proselytization, that there was a great adversary confrontation between Islam and Hinduism, and Lal spoke for Hindus. No, Lal was a legatee of the tradition of Kashmir Shaivism, Advait Shaivism, which since for last several centuries before her had been there in Kashmir. Just 2 centuries before her birth, the great Abhinav Gupta had lived, and since then there had been the large body, the huge body of disciples, the followers of the great seventh Abhinav Gupta, and there were schools of the schools of Kashmir Shaiv thought. And Lal is an expounder of this thought. She partakes of this legacy, and that legacy had not been fractured, it had not been changed. Likewise, the language of Kashmir, it continued to be what it had been all through the 14th century, the 15th century, and much later in the 16th century. There came the introduction of Persian. It was much later, at least in the period in which we are talking about. That is the first half of 14th century, the life of Lal. During that period, there was no Persian at all, no Persian words, no Persian language. About a century after Lal, we have Bhat Avatar. The diction of Bhat Avatar is so very free of any Persian words that it clearly shows that Lal could not have used any Persian words in her diction. I will read out one one line from Bhat Avatar, which is from this Kashmir Adbuk Tawarikh, the history of Kashmiri literature by Naji Munawar and Shifi Shok. It has been published by Kashmiri Department of Kashmir University. They have provided us a sample of Bhat Avatar's Banasur Vad Katha. 2 lines. Zen Napane Vimle Raje Shad Vimshe Varshe Katge Did Sarsot Pozet Aje Har Vanish Andar Vante. मतलब जैन निपाने बादशाह जैन विमले राजे शद विमशे तमिस गमित शद विमशे शतवो वरी तख्तस बिहित दिद सर सोत पोजेत आजे हर वनश अनत गंथे येलि मे ये बाना सर Vad sir sot katlish. What Bhat Avatar is here telling us is that Zainulabdin, Zain Nipane, he had been ruling for 26 years when he wrote this particular work of his Banasur Vad Katha. This is the line here. My point is that now we are talking a full century after Lal and not a single Persian word there. How can we accept the plethora of Persian words in works of Lal? Because the language Lal wrote in, it was totally free of Persian. That brings us to the body of work. Why I did relate this much of history, it is very important. Because the misconstruction of this history leads us to take the works which either are not of Lal or have been so polluted, so changed that they no longer retain their original diction, their original intent, even their original meaning. Here, about the walk, I want to present a proposition. It is a very well thought of assertion of mine that the whole body of work of Lal is not of Lal. This point has been raised by some writers. Prominent among these, J.L.L. Cole, who in the third edition of his Lal Death clearly separated 140, 42, 43 walks of Lal, and the rest of the walks, he said, they are not of Lal. This thing, this distinction between the genuine walk and the spurious walk is very important in understanding Lal. Often, people quote walks which probably are not from Lal. So, when we talk of walks of Lal, the body of walk, because as I said, very little is known about the persona of Lal. There is that irrefutable line from Sahjanand Nundaresh, and this the body of work which Lal left us. These are the two reliable points about Lal. But if this body of work is not genuine, if it is not of Lal, if it has been polluted, it has been interpolated, it has been changed over the course of time, then we have to be very cautious in interpreting them and in building the persona of Lal, because this is the only thing we have. John Raj does not speak of Lal. Other historians too don't speak of Lal. The Persian historian also does not speak of Lal. It is late in the mid 17th and 18th centuries, some 400 years after she lived, that we first come across the name of Lal in the regular Persian histories of Kashmir. And my experience is that that thing has got to be taken with a lot of caution. When we talk of the body of work of Lal, it is the safest way is to divide, separate the work chronologically. Chronologically, because at least for 300 years, we did not have any record of her works. We did not know whether the recorded work got burned down or got buried in the Dal during the turbulence of Sikandra in the last half decade of 14th century, when he collected, as Tariq Sayyid Ali tells us, all the books from Kashmir, all the old manuscripts written by gods and men, and got them buried to make a path, got them buried in park to make a path to across Lalleshwari, our present day Nishat. We do not know whether there had been a record and it was lost there. We don't know about that. But the fact is that we do not have at present a record of Lal from her time, from her death, say 1300, from her death in 1372, as we have established, till 18th century. In 18th century, the first compilation of works of Lal, 60 walks, is made by Bhaskaracharya or Ajanka Bhaskar. He collected 60 walks. For the next 2 centuries, this was all we had of Lal. Then, towards the end of 19th century, 1890 afterwards, somewhere along with the time when uh, Stein wrote his Raj Tarangni when he was working on Raj Tarangni. That time, around that time, Gregson got works of Lal. He never came to Kashmir. He got Madhusudan Shastri to send him some works. He also collected some works which Stein had collected. And from that, he compiled a collection which was also called LallaVakyani. Bhaskaracharya's collection of 60 works was called LallaVakyani, and Gregson also called his collection LallaVakyani. In it, he included the first 60 works as they were included by Bhaskar Razdan, Bhaskar Rajenka Bhaskar, and then he added some 61 works. Out of these, some 40 works were collected by people, his agents. Generally, it is said that Shastriji collected them from a reciter in Gushi in Kupwara, and then he collected some culled rather, some 12 or 15 from Nowell's collection of proverbs, and total came to somewhere around 120 works. Now, this has got to be understood. Here, this collection was published in 20th century, 1920, and in this, we have got the as pristine as we can get the 60 works of Lal and the additional 60 works added by Grierson. Of these 61 works, I consider only 41 which can be considered to be of Lal, and rest they have been shown to be proverbs, they have been shown to be of other people. So we get a total body of 100 works, around 100 works here. And then there were, of course, after Grierson's book LallaVakyani was published, there were probably the times too were good. So we had a number of collections. We had Anand Kol, of whom we spoke earlier. He collected, he gave us a collection of works. Then there were many other people. Lal Yogeshwari of Anand Kol. There was Kalam Lalla Arifa of Nizamuddin Khanyari, then Lalwak of Jialal Kol Jalali. And in all this, then there were also Lalwak Lalleshwari, very important work by A.K. Vanchu and Sarvanand Kol Charagi. They collected, got some around some 200 works. Anand Kol had already added 75 new works, and in fact, from 1920 till 1950-60, we had a number of collections of works of Lal, and Jayalal Kol and Nandlal Kol Talib, they have done a yeoman's job. They first produced a similar collection in 62 Lalded, published by Cultural Academy, but later Jayalal Kol worked on it, and he, on one hand, he went on collecting all the works that were attributed to Lal, and on the other, he did a sifting. In this sifting, he selected somewhere around 140, 143 works, which he said were genuine works, and the others were spurious works. This distinction is very important. But first, let us have the body of walks. So, the total walks as collected by JLL Cole in the last edition of, इसे क्या हो गया, ये तो बोल रहा है बंद हो गया. हाँ, हमारा तो चल रहा है. तुम्हारे वो कर रखी जबरा वो नेट. हेलो, हाँ, ये कैसे हुआ बंद? ना, ये शाबान, वी आर हैविंग ट्रबल प्लेइंग दिस वीडियो. हाँ, तो शो बुशा. चलो ठीक, देन आई विल कंटिन्यू. ठीक है. ये क्या बात हो रही है? Well, my computer was showing that there is some problem in playing this video, but they tell me that the video is on, that they are listening to it. So I think I will continue. Should I end it or? Huh? Huh? So, इनको फोन दो, इनसे पूछो क्या बोलो आ रहा है क्या. So we were talking of the collections of walks of love. In the last edition of his Lal Death, J.L.L. Cole, he collected a total of 258 walks. Out of those walks, somewhere around 140, he thought they were genuine. Of these 140, remember, this is the 60 of Bhaskar, then some 40 or 42 of Grierson, and some additional 30 or 35 walks, which Cole himself has culled from the various collections. And the rest, they are taken as spurious walks. Now, there's this is very important to understand here. This is very important to understand here why we call certain walks spurious. The first thing is that there have been interpolations. Since for 4 centuries, the walks were transmitted through the word of mouth, the words, the diction, the vocabulary subtly changed. Then there was another factor. We do not know how many poets added their own works or got added. We cannot say that they actively tried to distort the works, but there is a tendency among people, among versifiers, to try on works on a particular genre which has become very popular. Secondly, there was, I got a collection from Merzakak, wherein there is the first line is from Lal, and then he adds his own lines. Likewise, so many lines have been changed, and the final walk, this 100 walks or so, which we have had, they, yeah, मुझे दिखाओ, this 100 walks, they, पुराना है ये. अच्छा, this 100 walks or so, they would not be genuine walks of love. The connotations will not be correct. There is a very common walk, Soman Sayas Bhagyabaras. Now, the Bhag, orchard, garden, this would not have been in Lal's time. This would not have been in her vocabulary. So whatever she said, it would not have been this particular word. So with the result that we have a spurious walk here. Since then, a few collections have also been made, and among us these, there are some two collections which are very notable. One is by another Kashmiri writer, not a professional writer, an amateur writer, B.N. Sopori. He also produced a two-volume compilation of works, and therein, therein he produced a total of some uh, 228 works, and out of these 228 works, some 19 works are new. So there is another collection by Shri Amarnath, Srinath Hundu, Lalleshwari Vakyani of Pandit Amarnath. Shri Nath Hundu has given 4 works, and on examination I found them that 3 of them are already known, and there is one work, new work. So I have collected all of these works, and I have my compilation, Lull and her work and encyclopedia collection. It contains 277 works. Out of these 277 works, almost half of the works, they are doubtful. Doubtful means either they are not clearly of Lull, or there have been very serious interpolations, and at least the major words, important words in these works have been changed, with the result that we cannot rely on them to give us an idea of what Lull said, nor can we derive any assumptions or any clues about her person. It is in these walks, in these so-called spurious walks, that Lull is portrayed as an iconoclast of sorts, when in fact we see Lull as a very learned, very devout lady. Here, I would also like to add that Jonaraj has given a tale of a Yogini Nayaka who is said to have met Shahabuddin. Later Persian historians, Baharistan Shahi, Tariq Haidar Malik Chadura, Waqat Kashmir of Muhammad Azam Dedmari, as well as Tariq Hasan, all Kashmiri histories, they identify this lady as Lull. Now, she is, as per Jonaraja's account, the lady is Yogini Naika. If the identification of Persian chroniclers is correct, then there is nothing to suppose that she was an iconoclast. In fact, this assumption that Lull opposed rituals, that she was totally against them, that she disbanded them. We have got one fantastic tale which has been told by Dawood Mashkoti, and then thereafter related by Hassan as well, wherein it is said that she once went to a temple and urinated there. Why would a lady of Lull's sensitivity do such an abhorrent thing? And in fact, there is nothing to prove that she did so. But it's not only these tales. It is actually the very walks which have been so misinterpreted. We will take one simple walk of Lull. This is the 17th walk in Bhaskar's collection. Div vata, divur vata, petubun chui yikvata, ikvat, pooz kaskarak, patu vata, kar manast pavna sangat. This work, strangely, is generally interpreted to be to tell, to indicate that Lal was against all idol worship, Murti Puja. But the fact is, what Lal is telling us here, she is simply ideating the most essential Advaita truth in the Murti, the temple, the whole structure. She tells us that in Kashmir Shivism, I must here add, Kashmir Shivism accepts that from Param Shiva right up to the stone, it is one continuum of divine essence. There is a transformation, but there is the divine essence. And ascent and descent, it is all what we generally know about enlightenment, about awakening, about self recognition, and all those things. So when Lal says, Div Vata, Divur Vata, Div is Vata, the God is of stone. Divur Vata, the place where we worship him is of stone. This Patubon Chui Yakavata, the oneness, it transcends right from the top, Param Shiva, right up to this Prithvi, the last Tattva. We have got an example, a very good illustration of oneness. But somehow, this work, it has been interpreted into sort of abhorrence for puja rituals on the part of Lal. Lal in the works nowhere says that she was out to break something, but she was an enlightened one. She was an enlightened one, and she knew that we, it is not good at all to be caught in the ruts. When she says, Akui Omkar Yusnabe Dare, Kumbe Brahman Dasui Ghare, Aksui Manthar Jatas Kare, Tassas Manthar Kya Kare. He who focuses on Om alone and joins his being to the very Brahman, he concentrates on the single word. Akui mantra jatas kare. Tasas mantra kya kare? There is no need for reciting the mantras. Should we say that Lal was against mantras? That Lal was against all this great legacy? No. It was a realization. The realization of oneness. The oneness which sees Akuyobakar, which sees Divavata and Divavata. The same thing. Stone in God, stone in Lord, stone in the divine being, stone in the Prithvi, the 36 Tattva. This is what she tells us. Gagan sui, botal sui, sui dhyan pavantarat, arg sandun poshpun sui, sui chuk sorit legs kyat. Thou art the sky, the earth underneath. Thou art the day, the night and ether. Thou art the grain, petal and chandan. Thou art all. What else there is to offer? This is the point. Realization of oneness, one divinity, one Param Shiva, imbuing us all. It at some time, it with the realization getting thicker, it makes man feel, why should he bow? मेरे से बात करो इस हाँ हेलो हेलो है ना हेलो तो है यहाँ बोल रहा था ना सॉरी वी आर हैविंग ट्रबल प्लेइंग दिस वीडियो अब नहीं दे रहा है नाउ इट इज ओके पूछो 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 नाउ इट इज ओके ओके this is the misconstruction which some people, probably because of their own assumptions, because of their presumptions, they believe that Lal did not follow the what sometimes they say did not follow the rituals. She was totally against her and all that. We do not know whether she did follow the rituals, but we have works of her that tell that she was sort of neutral. There is the work 10 from Bhaskar's collection, a pristine work of Lal, which says, Vatranya Arjun Sakar, Athe Alupal Vakur Het, Yud Vanai Zanak Parmupad Akher, Keshikar Het. Unfortunately, because of our loss of diction, probably the recording of this particular work, there is some letter problem somewhere, but the work itself, the way form of it, it tells clearly that it is very close to diction of love. And what does it mean? It tells, come, O lady, begin thy preparations. Take all the essentials of worship with you. And at the same time, heed the sublime word and know that whichever way you worship, it is the same. This universalism, pluralism, was a reality of Kashmir of Lal. We have got historical evidence that when Shahmir came to Kashmir, he was welcomed. When Rinchen came to Kashmir, he was welcomed. When Rinchen became the king, there was no animus, nothing, no problem with his being a Buddhist because there were Buddhists in Kashmir. In fact, it is said that in the single family, there were some members who followed Shaivism, others who followed Buddhism, still others who were Vaishnavites, and all sects. There was no stream rolling, no straight jacketing that this is the only truth and everything else is falsehood. This is what Lal tells. Go, lady, do the preparations, do the worship, do the puja as per your tradition. But remember at the same time that it is the intent of worship, your devotion, your understanding which matters, not the particular way in which you will worship. There is another very beautiful work. It is in fact a question answer. Kus pushtai kosu poshoni, kam kusum lagzes pooze, kau ras dizes gad zaladani, kau sana mantar shankar swat muguze. Who is the gardener? Who the flower girl? Which flower should you worship with? Which water should you sprinkle there? By which mantra would Shankar emerge? Before we go to Lal's answer, we need to note a couple of points here. There is worship. Flowers are being used. The other rite is the rituals. Sprinkling of water, doing this, doing that, performing the various elements of that puja. They are all mentioned. They are all acknowledged. But the point is that even while performing them, the worshipper, the person who offers flowers, the person who sprinkles water, the person who pays obeisance, that person should know that divinity, God, spirituality is beyond, is not confined to this particular worship, the mode of the worship, but it encompasses all. And now see what Lal answers to this question. Kuspushtai kosu pushani, kam kosam legzes puje, kauras dijes gadzaldani, kausana mantar shankar soatma bize. Here, I would like to make a slight digression to illustrate the addition and interpolation which we were talking about. I have got an earlier, this year I got, in fact, about a decade back, I was once with that renowned Kashmiri scholar, T.M. Ganju, and he showed me a manuscript, a Sharda manuscript. And he said that he had got that particular manuscript with great effort and was working on it. Fortunately, a couple of years back, I got a digital copy of the very same manuscript. And I have been studying that manuscript. It contains walks, about 100 walks it contains of Lal. And it gives for this particular walk, which clearly shows that there are additional words here, it gives a much simpler diction, but that diction is gives the same meaning. See, this diction is kasu poshtai kusu poshai kam kosam lagses pooj kausar gad dises zaldani kame mantro ishar uze. And the answer is man pushto ish pushani. Man pushto ish pushani bhav ke kosam lagse pooj shishir sag gad dises zaldani swapya mantro ishwar uze. Mind is the God. Will is the flower girl. With flowers of devotion, thy worship perform. Sprinkle the nectar from the digit of moon. Mantra of silence will make Ishar emerge. The diction which we know, the particular wording of these two particular walks, this is at present from what Grierson and Cole have written. But this is a much simpler diction which comes from a Sharda manuscript. Probably this is my book. I will be probably including these things in the next edition of this particular work. The point which I want to emphasize here is that it probably is not correct to say that Lal was opposed to ritual, or that she was out to break all rituals, or that she hated them, or did, or whatever else you can add, all the other superlatives. Not superlatives, they are actually expletives. But we do not have much evidence of that in Lal. Lal understands ritual. Lal allows the performance of ritual. But she does not counsel a person to get caught in that ritual. She emphasizes transcendence, and that is Kashmir Shaivism. Kashmir Shaivism is very emphatic in its insistence that it is realization, the understanding, the knowledge that we are all divine, which will become our enlightenment, our mukti, and our getting to be the God himself. We are one with Shiva. Khemraj tells in his introductory book, Parapraveshka, he discusses at threadbare this particular point that if we take man, woman, all the humanity, not to be divine, then there is no hope for this divinity, because something which is devoid of the divine spark will not be able to produce that spark. This is Kashmir Shaivism. You cannot produce ab novo, you cannot produce new, that spark you cannot produce. What you can do is that the spark is there. You have only to air it, make it glow, and make the whole being kindle, make your Atma kindle, make it one great flourish and illumination. From Vimarsh, go to Prakash. But that Prakasha is not possible if the spark is itself not there. That spark will not be there if we understand the material world, the stone, to be bereft of the divine thing, to be the creature, the creations, humans, to be bereft of Shiva Tattva. That is why Lal says that you have to realize this. You have to see that you are one with Shiva, because you are that spark. You have simply to air that spark and make it glow. Glowing that spark. Kashmir Shaivism tells that it comes not by ritual. Very clearly. In fact, Kashmir Shaivism is distinctive in holding that the easiest way to realization to moksha is ichha. Then comes jnana. Then comes kriya. Kriya is a very lowly thing. But if you do not have the capacity to will, to know, then probably kriya will guide you there. Kriya is never an end in itself. That is the mistake. The people who do not understand the perspective of ritual with Lal, in fact, in the whole of Kashmir Shaivism, ritual is not needed if you have got ichha. If your understanding is so bright, so illuminative, so enlightened, that you understand that you are one with God, there's no point in following any rituals. But that is not being against ritual. This is the realization. This is pratibhigya. This is understanding. Lal, the very first walk which Bhaskar has put is Abhyas Savyakas Layu Vatho Gagna Sogan Mule Samasrata Shunya Goltai Anamai Moto Yuhai Wapade Shipata. Abhyas Savyakas Layu Vatho, the striving one, the evolving one, the person who is progressing from ritual to knowledge to will, he will rise. The striving, evolving one did rise. The coarse and fine, they became one. The void melted away and only Om remained. This is the message. This is the message. Many people have this wrong notion that ritual is the end, be all and be all. Ritual is the very first step and it's the lowest step. If you cannot go into knowledge, jnana, if you cannot will, if you cannot tell yourself, if you cannot realize the oneness being one with Param Shiva, then probably the path for you is to strive through ritual. But ultimately, striving, you have to evolve, you have to arise. The course has got to be made fine. That fine essence has got to be realized, and that is that fine essence itself. When everything is melted away, only Om remains. That is the realization. That is Pratibhikya. That is what Lal says. Lalbo drayas lo lare, sandan lusum den kyohorat, wuchum pandit panne gare, sui me rotmas nakhetat sat. Lal, I set out on the quest and searched it night and day. I searched for thou. And after all this search, the Pandit I saw in my own body. And then and there, I came to know. This is knowledge. And this knowledge brings will, understanding. This obviates the need for any rituals. This is oneness. We had an evidence of oneness in Divata, Divarvata. There is another one here. Swaishil Patast Pithas. Swaishil Shai Utmo Desh. Swaishil Fier Vinis Gratas. Shivshi Growth the Zian of Desh. Again, the oneness, the thread of oneness, the stone that forms the pedestal and the path. The same stone bears the land well wrought. Translations are my own. These are from my book, Lal and Her Work. The stone that forms the pedestal and the path. The same stone bears the land well wrought. The same stone graces the moving mill too. Shiva is the path. Take the cue. Here we have got from Murti to daily concourse of life to the essential feeding, moving mill, grata included, and the symbol of Lord Param Shiva, the peat whereupon the idol of Lord stays. Some people have got this very strange notion that the idol sitting on that pedestal, Peetaspyat, Murti, that is the God then and there. It's not so. It is simply simple. God is not either beyond, it is within us. Vuchum Pandit Panni Gare. It is within us. It is inside. Goras Prasam Sasha Late. Yasna Keh Vanan Taska now. Prasan Prasan Thajus Solusis. Keh Nish Yahtandra. My Guru I asked 1,000 times, what is the nameless called by? Asking and asking, I got sore and worn. For sure, something come of the try. And what was that something? Goran Vunnam Kunai Watsun. Nebra Doktam Andar Atsun. Sui me Laligo walk to Watsun. Tawai Hutum Nangantus. My Guru gave me but one lead. From within, from without, do speed. It was the word and text for me. and I began to dance in glee. Now, unfortunately, this simple sentence, this simple usage, Nangai Natsun, has been transformed by certain people into very strange meanings. The very same people who know from the Persian histories that it is the Yogini Nayaka. If their identification is correct, then where does this spectacle of a naked woman roaming around senseless come from? This simply is not correct. Nangai Natsun is a very simple Kashmiri usage. We use it even today. When young children they go out of house in the compound, roaming around barefooted, we say Nangai Natsun. They are moving with naked feet. In fact, when we come to Lal, there is the pristine understanding. There is this great body of work. Vak manas kol akolna ate, sapi mudri atena pravesh, rozan shiv shakatna ate, matiye kuntai sui upadesh. There ain't word, mind, being and non-being. Silence, symbols, nothing exists there. Shiv and Shakti are transcended there. Whatever remains, that alone abides. We know, we understand these very pristine words, these intimations, which can only be called divine. But at the same time, we sometimes get so caught in the uh, perfidies of our own thought that we try to sometimes ridicule, sometimes debase, and sometimes simply denounce the great iconic lady of Kashmir, Lal. That is the reason why I insisted that when we try to understand Lal, we have to be very particular about the history in which she lived, the times in which she lived, the social milieu in which she lived, the language which she could have used, and what the later interpolations, pollutions, changes, whether intended or unintended, have done to her work, those distortions we have to be very wary of. That is where we lose the thread of love. That is where probably we lose this great saintess herself. Else she says, Yimai Shetsia, Timai Shemia, Shama Galasev, one, Turtas, Yuhai Biam Bid, Setmia, Sishan Swami, Bushan Bushes. The six you have, I have them too. O blue throated one, I am lost sans you. Yet the difference sets ye apart from me, that thou hold them all, and I forgot the call. A very important tenet of Kashmir Shaivism is that there is no difference in these six: the power to know, power to create, those